We'll get started. I'd ask that we all stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is a public work session where the board will hear a variety of reports and have discussion regarding topics which may be scheduled for official action at a future meeting. During this meeting, we will not be voting or making the final decision on any topic. Questions and comments by members of the audience will be limited to those topics on the agenda for this meeting. This meeting is being videotaped for community cable channels. Individuals attending this meeting and intending to speak to the board should be aware that they are being videotaped. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the board during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the board come to the microphone and state their name and address. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all of those who wish to speak to the board. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the board president may ask the individual to yield the microphone to the next speaker. I'd ask that you all turn to the next page. As you can see, tonight's agenda is rather lengthy again, and as board president, I'm going to take the initiative to say that we will wait until the end of all of the topics to open it up to audience of citizen. Again, it's an aggressive schedule, and we will be talking quite a bit about budget development tonight, along with many other items. So again, we will have audience of citizens after curriculum and instruction. I do intend to get through this complete agenda tonight. Saying that, I'll move on to item number 1, which is funding of Penndale renovation completion. I'll turn it over to Mr. Dennis Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. We've been over this before, and this is on the agenda once again to get consensus to send out an RFP for a $25 to $26 million bond issue in order to fund $18 million, which would fund the addition to the current high school. $2.5 million would be for our share of the VOTEC renovations. 1.6 would be to finish the Penndale renovations, an additional 3.1 to finish the other items that were included in that bond issue. I'd also like the board to consider an expenditure of $300,000 to $350,000 in there for new software. We've reached the limit on our current software. We've had it since about 1983, so we're looking at 13 years we've had. It's about had it, and there's a new package that a number of school districts in the area, including Norristown, Marple Newtown, Upper Darby, have all gravitated toward. It's an upgraded version of our current software. I'll be sending the board specifications on that in the next few days. I'd like them to consider putting that in this bond issue. So in the end, it would be somewhere between $25 and $26 million. It's imperative that we move soon. Our share of the VOTEC renovations is due on July 1st. The other 4 districts have all committed to that date. So that's what we'll be going for at the action meeting later this month. Mr. Clements?
To make sure I understand this.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to be looking for from the board for the action meeting this month?
Consensus to send an RFP out for both underwriting and financial counseling for a bond issue in the amount of $25 to $26 million, depending on what the board agrees to.
Would like discussion on that tonight as far as an amount, or would you like discussion tonight just to authorize, or with the action meeting to authorize you to RFP for services?
That's all. That's the reason this is on the agenda, just to get authorization at the action meeting to do the RFP.
To place this on the agenda.
To place this on the agenda for action.
Right.
Unless the board has any questions this evening.
Well, let's open it up for some questions. Start on this side, Bill.
A couple questions. One is, do we have to make an action just to go out for an RFP? Can we just get a consensus tonight and get the process started? We're not approving this expenditure. We're just saying, let's get started.
That would be
I
fine
open that
also.
up for procedural question. I have a question concerning the software that you're asking for. Can you tell us what it's for? Which software package?
It's through Penimation. Our current software carrier is Penimation, and we're currently on the leadership package. They've upgraded to what they call the Open Series. Instead of a mainframe-based, it's a PC-based software package. Besides financials, it also has scheduling, rostering, report cards. It has the administrative side also. From what I've seen of it, I respect the people in Norristown very much, and they investigated a number of software packages and decided to go with Penimation. I've always been satisfied with what the leadership series gave us. We've just outgrown it. For an example, the current payroll system has really a maximum of about 12,000 deduction entries in it. When we went to a flex benefits system, with the number of employees we have, we're up to 35,000. So we're kind of pushing the system to its limit, and I wouldn't want to see a crash on us at any time. That would leave us in a pretty bad predicament.
So it's all administrative software, it's not
Oh,
instructional
I'm sorry,
software?
John. Yes, it is. It's administrative. It's not
Okay.
instructional. This is strictly administrative.
And how old is what we're using?
We went with Penimation back in 1983 is when they started this.
Thank you.
Pat, questions?
How long has Norristown had their system?
They went live with their payroll as of January 1st, and they've been adding financials as they go along, month by month.
So they've only had the system since January.
Right, they've just had it since January, Pat.
Is there any maintenance fee involved with this?
Yes, there is. I'm just going to send to the board the entire package and what it would cost. We will get a discount versus other districts because we'll be what they call migrating from their current software to the new version. So we'll get a better deal than the schools that went from other software packages.
Do you have an actual figure on that?
It'll end up coming to about $350,000.
No, what's the maintenance, monthly, yearly?
Oh, yearly. It's a yearly maintenance fee of about $23,000.
Okay, and you're saying this system is strictly for administrative purpose, not strictly for your department? In other words,
Oh, no,
we
it's
can
not
handle
strictly-
all
it's-
administrative functions in this building with this computer?
That's correct. It has personnel budgeting. It's a full-service software. It's not just financials. Financials are a major part of it.
District-wide service.
District-wide service, that's correct.
That's all I have, Mr. Fox. Thank you.
Over to this side. John?
Do we presently pay a maintenance fee to what we have now, or is just?
Yes, we're paying a maintenance fee of it's like $18,700 a year.
Okay.
Did we get an answer to Mr. Allen's question about whether we need a procedural type
Well,
of?
I think we could direct either Ken or Bud or Ken to talk with our solicitor to find out whether we need it. If we don't need it, I would
If we
agree. Why
don't-
couldn't we get it
That's
started
right.
without an action?
That's really my question. I mean, if it's an issue of getting an RFP rolling, and we don't need anything procedural, I don't see what it hurts to.
And
to
for the
get that
board's
out there.
information, the RFPs are done. I was
Right.
just waiting to get a firm figure on what amount we were going to go out for.
Okay. In regards to the amount, other than the RFP itself, I'm not sure whether we'll ever get to the point whether we want to get to your option number 3, Dennis, but is there any possibility of a combination thereof between a general obligation bond and additional dollars budgeted for the 96-97 school year? Is that an option you've considered?
Not really, but that'd be strictly up to the board.
And I think it'll take us about a year to get a consensus to do that, so why don't we just stick with the RFP?
Okay.
Well, I think we can get a consensus on the board of the bond. I think the bond is the way to go, and I think the $26 million, these things that we're talking about adding to the school district should be paid by the taxpayers over the long time of a bond of 30 years, because everybody's going to be using the district over the 30 years, should be have equal payment over that, and not try to roll any of that into our budget this year, which is going to be high enough this year, with just things we need to function this year, and try to reduce the the bonding by, on the front end, but that's something we can talk about later. But my opinion has been from the beginning and remains that we should go out for this bond at the 26 million that we laid out already for what those numbers are. So, and I also agree that let's get it started with the process, as Mr. Allen brought up. One other item, you are going to send a note out on this software since you brought it up. And in that software notice you're going to bring out, you're going to explain what that maintenance fee is for.
That's correct, Mr.
And you're
Chairman.
also,
You'll see that spelled
if there
out.
are other additional, is the hardware, the PCs that support this software going to have to be changed, or upgraded, or changed? So you have the total cost in there.
Right, the total cost will be in there. I said to them before they gave me the presentation, I said, I don't want any hidden cost, whatever if there's a maintenance fee, and they put everything in there.
I want to make
for
sure
me.
our PCs can handle it.
That's correct. What the hardware will be, they'll need a server, a main server that everyone feeds off of, but that's not the major part of the expense. But that will be all spelled out for you.
All right, fine.
Any more questions, Don? I gotta make sure I understand how this breaks down again. What do we need to finish Pendale?
1.6 million.
And what's our share to the VOTEC?
2.5.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that 2.5 is what's driving right now the need to go for bond, meaning we have to come up with that 2.5 by when?
By July 1st. The 5 districts committed to making that payment on July 1st.
We committed to it last month. We
Correct.
committed. Okay, so we need to have that money by July 1st.
Correct. And it would just be in the best interest of the district to fold all these into one bond issue and cut down on the fees and
And the interest rates aren't going to get any better than they are today.
right, and if we do it as soon as
I'm
possible.
afraid they're going to go up, that's why.
That's right.
Won't we need Penndale money this summer too?
We'll need that this summer, but it was just, we won't really need that until maybe August or September, but it was just in the,
Okay.
like, as I said, the best interest to fold all the fees into one issue rather than spreading them out.
Okay.
So the big items are, the 1.6 for Pendale, the 2.5 for North Monco, and then we would go ahead and borrow the money for the high school, for the
That's
addition.
correct, for the addition.
And it's around, and that's also would include the improvements to the high school, not just the addition, the improvements.
The improvements also. I think, I don't want to speak for Art, but I
Yeah, I
thought the
believe from
18
last
million
meeting,
considered
right.
those
18
two.
has
Right.
the improvements.
Right. So, I asked you this today, but I'm on the phone, but I'm gonna ask you again. What's our debt right now, principal?
Our principal is 91 million. I'm sorry, that's last year's. The principal this year is 77 million.
It's 77.
77 million, and with the interest, we're up to 102 million.
102.
Okay.
Another question I asked you today, I'm gonna ask you again tonight. Will we be open, in the past, this district has always, to the best of my knowledge, done bonds through competitive bids. Would we be open, I will be a proponent of, I'm only one board member, but I will be a proponent of us looking into possibility of negotiated sale in lieu of an competitive bid, or see how it comes out. Are we gonna talk about that?
We're
as
gonna
far
talk
as
about that. I've always been in favor of competitive bid myself.
Right,
but
I know.
We will look at what a negotiated sale, what that could mean to the district also.
Okay. Just, I wanted to get that in there, that we will at least look into
We'll look
that.
at it.
Right, okay. That's all the questions I have. Anybody else have any other questions on that? So, well, Dennis, we will go ahead, you go ahead and work with Dr. Bose as far as working with our solicitor to find out whether a consensus tonight is okay. Is there consensus to tell Dennis to go forward with the RFP for financial advisor?
Yes. And if there's no problem, they can be out by the end of the week.
Okay. Any other questions on that topic? Okay, we'll move on. Oh, let's see, number 2, budget development, discussion of future work session dates. Turn that back over to Dennis.
Both Dr. Bose and myself today drafted a memo to the board, which is at your place, on dates that that we looked on the calendar and we wanted to check with you to see if they fit into your schedules for discussion of the budget. Once we've settled on the dates, we'll then get back to you on what topics we'll be discussing on certain nights. We wanted to get the dates settled first.
We just got this tonight, right?
That's
Everybody
correct.
just got a copy of this. I'll open it up for discussion about these dates.
The only thing I'd like to say, Mr. Clem, is in view of the fact that 3 of our members are absent tonight, that could have a significant effect on these dates. I think it's important enough that all board members be present, especially for this budget.
We can poll those who are
Yeah,
absent.
well,
Yes.
okay, yeah.
If you want
What
to.
we could do is, we could at least start with these dates, and we could ask Ken to poll all the board members yet this week to see if these would work.
I think the important thing is we begin to hold dates, we begin to reserve dates,
Right.
or we'll have.
I just had one question, Dennis. You have tentatively four dates here, and then you have a note that discussion can also take place at board work session on Tuesday, May the 7th.
That's correct.
So tentatively, we're looking at...
We're looking at 5
work-
dates.
There are
5 dates, but I
Five
didn't
work
want to
sessions.
confuse the work session with extra meetings.
How many departments did you plan to discuss each night, or what did you plan to bring forward each night?
We've usually, in the past, we've usually discussed somewhere between 2 and 3 each night. Like, say curriculum can almost take up a night in itself when we do elementary, secondary, and special education. So we would get back to you with how we're going to divide this up.
Yeah, I think that would be important, because we could very easily load ourselves down with a couple of areas in one evening, and
Oh, right.
wait
No,
till
we
the sun comes up.
Oh, yeah, we've tried to divide it. Like personnel is almost, I think in the past, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Smith, it's been one night. Just one night in itself for a discussion of personnel.
Yeah, I would like to see a breakdown of that, just so that we have an idea of what we're letting ourselves in. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Bill?
No.
John? David?
No questions.
Don?
Those dates are fine with me.
I talked to Dennis earlier today. Those dates were fine for me also. Dennis, though, I'd ask that you bring the board and the community up to date, though, if these dates do work out, what we would be talking about of when we may attempt to adopt a preliminary budget. We did discuss that earlier today.
That's right.
May meeting. At the
I think
regular-
you said that if we could all agree, and hopefully we can on these dates, that possibly by the May 9th,
We would
meeting.
need to have a preliminary by the May 9th meeting. We need it within, because the June meeting is June 16th, so we need it within 30 days of that. Okay?
so you need to keep in mind, on this memorandum that we received right there on the Thursday, May 9th, you probably had to jot down a note.
And I would, there
jot
would be
note
a
that that's where we
note
would-
there, that would be
we
preliminary
would
adoption.
Want to adopt the preliminary budget.
When is that?
That would be
May
on
9th.
Thursday evening, May 9th.
Is that an official action meeting then?
That's not an action meeting.
No,
Action meeting's the 16th.
Right. But
Correct.
you don't have to do that in an action meeting.
You don't?
Preliminary adoption.
We'll probably be adopting the final budget on June 20th. Will we not? June 20th.
Okay, I was under the impression it was the 16th for some reason.
No, the 16th.
20th.
The 16th is in May.
Right.
20th is-
May 16th could be, if you chose, the preliminary adoption.
Okay.
Because
that's-
May 20th would be the final adoption, and you would have your 30 days.
In at that point, okay.
Am I correct?
That's correct.
maybe I wrote it, okay. I thought I wrote down May 9th, didn't I?
Well,
Okay.
at this
But
afternoon,
Ken, what you're saying
that's
is
what I was under the impression.
Right, Thursday night, May 9th, could be our last work session on that.
Or if you declare it an action meeting, you could adopt it that night if you
Well, we're
chose.
probably gonna need
But you
more
would-
time than
Depending on
less.
the amount of time.
You would have until the 16th. The meeting of the 16th would be your adoption date.
Okay,
Yeah. Well, I looked
so
at something
that
else
will be our
had the
target
7th.
date. We'll target the 9th. If we don't make it preliminary adoption for the 9th, we will adopt the preliminary budget on May 16th. That is the action meeting. Questions or comments on that, on the dates? Then I will ask Ken to contact board members who are absent tonight and see if we could find out by Friday that it could go out into on our packets on Friday to find out whether we all can make it for these dates. Any other questions on the budget development and the dates? Okay, hearing none. Item number 3 is the detailed systems analysis. I believe that was requested by Mrs. Scher. I don't know much about it, to be quite honest. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? If there are no questions or comments, what I'd like to do is direct Dennis to get back to Vicki if we'd like to bring it up in another work session.
That's fine.
Anybody have a problem with that?
No. Since she brought it up, she should hear it.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4.
Mr. Clements, in the packet, there was, we were going to start discussions tonight on revenue, but with the absence of the members, if you would rather wait until we open the budget hearings, or the budget discussions, that would be fine.
When did you want to bring that up? Did you want to bring that up under item 2?
That's what when I talked with Dr. Boas, we had talked about doing that and opening tonight with the revenue. But as I said, with Mrs. Scher and Mrs. Krieger and Mrs. Mangle absent, if you would prefer to wait to have them hear the presentation, that's fine also.
I don't really have an opinion either way. I would open that up for discussion of the board. How's the board feel?
State the question again, I'm even.
Basically, Dennis was prepared to bring up tonight what our revenue might look like for next school year. He is prepared tonight to give us an idea of what it may look like. He suggested perhaps we may want to wait until Mrs. Scher, Mrs. Krieger, and Mrs. Mangle can attend. I would say it's our option here tonight as a board as to whether we want to discuss that further.
Just throw my 2 cents in there. I mean, the revenue projections are always a part of the budget process, and it seems like we're discussing it twice if we do it now. That's always the opening remarks, if you will, of any budget discussion, and I don't see a need to do it twice.
I agree.
Just means
So
Dennis is
basically-
prepared 30 days in advance.
Basically, we'd be opening up the revenue portion on April 24th.
That's fine.
That isn't, but it is in the packet tonight as
It
part of
is,
the
so
discussion.
you can review it.
The public does have that to view ahead of time for the 24th. Any other questions on that? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Item 4, farming Keenest Road property. I'll turn that over to Art Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. You have before you in your packet a green sheet which clearly defines the proposal that was set forth. Mr. McCauley, who has the vegetable and garden mart at the corner of Keenest Road and Pusham Road, for many years farmed the Keenest Road property, first as an agreement with the Hulls, and secondly, as an agreement with Mr. Cutler. When we took possession of the property, they still had keen interest in doing that, but I had a concern because we had a proposal on the docket to do a second building out there, or a second high school, and as a result, recognized that we would be doing a Phase 1 archaeological dig, which is typically, or study, which is typically plowing under all that land, and then, of course, walking it to see what kind of artifacts are found. So I had a concern about allowing the McCaulays to farm that last year, with the understanding that we're not going to be doing an archaeological dig on that property. I would recommend that we grant the McCauley family the right to farm the property. I think we need to work out an agreement with Mr. Bartle, which I would do, that spells out clearly if the board would opt to dispose of the property, that he would then have to negotiate with a new owner as far as harvesting crops, and also we would determine the amount of land. It's approximately 35 acres, and I can only say from past experience, having the Gwinnett Square property farmed, where I think initially it was $1 a year and then it went to $100 a year, that this is an attractive number and a satisfactory number. It exceeds $25 an acre, and that's pretty much a benchmark or a standard for that type of operation. The other thing that it does, that property is a difficult property for us to monitor. We have an employee and her sister living above the implement shed, and we can be thankful we do. They pay a minimal rent, but in exchange for the minimal rent, they maintain the property, they mow the grass, they actually serve as people that monitor what goes on in the property. And believe me, when you own 136 acres and it belongs to all the taxpayers in the community, that certainly gives them the right to dump on it, to do anything they want on the property. So it's good to have people there, and I would encourage the fact that we would have farming taking place, that there are people in and out of the property, and that we do have the kind of protection that we need as far as trespassers and people that do want to take advantage of the property. So I would recommend that we grant the farming rights to the McCauley family, and payment of $900 should be made for this consideration.
Before I open it for discussion, is anybody opposed to this? Does anybody feel we need to discuss it? Do we, Pat?
Just had a couple questions.
Okay.
That's all.
Sure.
Is this a one-time charge, this $900
Per year.
per year?
Yeah, we would enter in each year, depending, and Mr. McCauley certainly understands that the board has not made a decision as to what you're going to do with the property,
So we
so
do have
it would be,
escape clause.
oh yeah, it would be a year to year.
That's all I have.
Would you need that for the action agenda?
Yeah, but I do want to start working with Mr. Bartle to put the process together, because if we ever get some dry weather, Mr. McCauley will want to lime the property, and I don't want to delay his plowing and disking and liming process. So I would hope that after the board meeting, he could start immediately doing something with the property if he can get on it.
Art, just one question. The escape clause typically 90 days, 120 days.
Well, the escape clause would be, first of all, there'd be a clause stating that if for some reason the property changed hands and the new owner would not grant him the right to harvest, he fully understands he loses the crops.
Correct.
And the other thing we would do following his harvesting in the fall, and he typically puts some corn in, following that, and pumpkins as a matter of fact, and following that harvesting, we would then enter into a new lease for the next year.
Any other questions?
Not a question, I just had a thought while I was going through this. I mean, this property has always been farmed, isn't that right? Just as a thought to last year and not plowing it because of the fact that we might have to do an archaeological study, isn't that kind of after the fact? It's been plowed and turned over so many times that what would have been the difference?
Not in accordance with the State Historical Commission.
Really, so they could have turned that ground over 100 times and...
Exactly.
Still to turn it over.
Perfect, Mr. White's, a perfect example was the fact that the Walton Farm property was farmed also,
That's
and
true,
we had to
that's a good
replow
point.
that.
Good point. Good point. But it's
You
not
might
as though we were
find,
going
you
to
could find
disturb...
an arrowhead in 136 acres.
We should probably
Thanks,
put
Art.
something in the contract
Just-
about getting our vegetables at discount prices.
Can we put it in the contract that if he does find an arrowhead, he'll hide it and keep it? In case we ever need that property?
All kidding aside, we did have a concern about that property because it was typical that Indians would camp along a creek, and with the little Neshaminy going down through there, every time we talked about doing an archaeological study, we were hoping that we wouldn't get into the phase 2. So,
Yeah, no, I remember the concern when we did the bridle path over the timelines and what happens if one artifact showed up.
Is that what that's all about, over an artifact?
yeah.
You got it. I mean,
We
You
had,
have to turn it over again to...
no, I'm saying that you have to do it, and if you find an artifact, the fact that it could be a site for Native Americans, that stops, and they have to do a complete examination.
There's one more chance other than one that you might find.
That's the law, right?
phase
Art?
2, you look for the burial ground and the campground, and
Yep. Thanks, Art. Sorry to...
Any other questions or comments? No problem with that appearing on the agenda for the action meeting. Okay, we'll move that on to the action meeting. Moving on to item 5, Hatfield Elementary School entrance. I'll turn that also to Mr. Wood.
There has been considerable discussion, and I shared with you a letter I had received from concerned parents and my response, and the fact that we met with township officials. Mr. Allen attended that meeting one morning to see the conditions firsthand. We do have a safety problem as it relates to the width of the driveway as it enters Fairground Road, and if you're familiar with it, the only other place without infringing on the fields, the Little League fields we have there, would be to put another entrance on the curve, and of course that is not an acceptable process. So we came up with an idea where we could widen the existing driveway, and it would give us an entrance, a left-hand turn and a right-hand turn, but also would give us a parent drop-off area and 22 additional parking spaces that we desperately need. So after meeting with Jeff Word and township people, the township safety director, Mr. Forst, and a number of other people, Jeff Word, who is the township engineer, prepared a sketch and took it before Hatfield Township Board of Commissioners, and they were in agreement with it and have encouraged us to proceed. I have placed in the budget, the 96-97 budget, $35,000 for this proposed project, and I would now encourage the board to engage Mr. Wirt to do all the necessary work that would prepare us for construction, including some bid documents, and his fee for that would be $3,250, which I consider to be very reasonable in light of the fact that that includes the survey work that has to be done and everything that would prepare the documents for us to begin construction. If, and I make the point in the green sheet, if that money would not stay in the budget for this year, the plans could always be used. They're not going to change. I mean, the elevations aren't going to change and the plans aren't going to change. So I think in order to make that a reality for September, we really need to start at this point with the design. And I understand it's, I'm assuming that it will be approved, and I don't want to press my luck and make that assumption, but on the other hand, if it is approved and we want it for September, we need to start now, and if it isn't approved, we still have that plan to use it another time.
Okay, let's open it up for some questions. Let's start over here. Mr. Hill?
Yes, I think we have to go ahead with it. But I would recommend, this is a long-term project. I think at $35,000, I would like to roll that into that same bond we're talking about as coming out of that funding, because it falls in the same type of, it's a long-term thing, it's not a short-term thing. And we're going to have, and I'd rather get that out of this year's budget and get it into a bonding to spread those costs over a longer period of time. And I think something like this adequately belongs in the bonding. That's my
Might I
recommendation.
suggest, Don, for what it's worth, I think with the way things are proceeding at Penndale, I'd be comfortable with your permission to take that out of the contingency that I have at Penndale. I think we can afford $35,000.
I just don't want to see it in as another line item in this year's budget.
We can certainly work, and I can work with Dennis, and we can fund it out of the existing bond issue. I mean, we don't even need to roll it in the new bond issue.
No question.
John?
I think we have to do what's needed. I know they have problems over there, and it's a great safety concern, and we have to do it and get it done.
Bill?
I'm in favor of it. Let's do it.
Pat? I read all the correspondence. There has been quite a bit of correspondence back and forth from Hatfield Township to the district, and a lot of it, all of it made sense, and I support it. So it sounds like there is support to place that on the agenda for the action meeting. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to item number 6, North Monco Technical Career Center budget. I'm not sure who to turn that over to be honest with you.
Raise your hand, Dennis, don't be afraid.
The items for both the North Monco Career Center and the IU will be on the agenda for board approval at the action meeting. We put those on to see if there were any questions that we could answer for you between now and then. I don't pretend to be an expert on these budgets. With doing our own, I have not gotten to review them, but if you have any questions, I certainly will and get back to you.
These materials have been distributed previously for both budgets.
Right, the board already has it.
The board has had it for at least a month, I believe.
Right.
Yes.
We don't have much choice, I don't think.
But everyone did receive them in their packets, both copies of both budgets, correct?
Yes, yes, we did.
Okay, questions or comments?
Dennis, the only thing I would like to see if you could possibly do it when we get into the budgetary process. Don just mentioned a few minutes ago about putting things into the bond and pay. Could you possibly break down for us some way, give us a sheet or something showing, we throw a lot of money around here and we keep talking about we need to fund this and need to fund that. Give us a projection of what you would like to see in this bond so that we know what that 26 million is going to make up.
Right, Mr. Lindsay, we had talked about that earlier, but I'll certainly.
I know we did.
Okay, I'll get that.
Benefit of the public.
Sure, I'll get that printed up for you.
I mean, because it's quite, I understand what Don's saying, but it's quite possible we may have some projects that come up that would be kind of ridiculous to put in a 20-year bond, that maybe we could fund them on a one-time basis.
Well, as I said earlier, when we had talked about this at a preliminary meeting, that from now on, we will always have, in the prospectus that goes out of here, we will always have a budget in there, so that at any time, 10 years from now, somebody can go back and see exactly what that money was designated for. It will not be vague, it will be specific and with specific dollars associated with that project.
Thank you.
Pat, I think another example or an item that will come up, and I certainly would think it'll come up under the budget discussions, would be the need for buses.
Right.
How are we gonna handle that? In the
Right.
past, we have done that out of bonds.
It seems ridiculous to pay for buses over 20 years.
I could see us getting into that discussion as part of the budget discussion, how we are gonna handle that. So, that's a good point. Any other questions or comments on the North Monco or the MCIU budgets? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We'll move on to policy, and I believe, Don, you, as policy liaison, you have a policy to read.
Well, there is on the agenda this month, there'll be another policy that we're bringing forward that describes the new employment procedures. In summary, everybody has a copy of this. In summary, the new policy states that a new employee will be considered a temporary employee or substitute employee until the board officially hires the individual during an action meeting on the board. There's been a concern about the board, about a lot of the people being appointed and on the payroll before they have been approved by the board. So we want to clarify both so the administration, the board, and the new hiree knows particularly where he stands or she stands as an employee. The effective date of all these board appointments were recorded in official minutes of the board. It's another part of that policy. And associated with this policy, of course, we need an administration regulation, and that has been developed to support this board policy. Both these documents are included in your packet tonight, or we got it earlier in the day, and the audience has it there also. And of course, we'll be reading the second reading of the policy we brought forward last month.
To supplement what Mr. Hill has said and to remind those who may have forgotten, the origin of this was an interest on the part of the board to discontinue a practice of ratifying appointments, and that is making an appointment after the person had already begun to work as an employee in the school district. And with the help of Charles Sweet, an attorney with an expertise in personnel matters, this language was developed both for the policy, which Mr. Hill mentioned, and the rules and regulations that would implement the policy. They simply have to be in reverse order among the board's material, but that's what all of this represents.
I'll open for questions. But just before questions, though, this would be prepared for a first reading at the next regularly scheduled action meeting, correct?
Of the policy only.
Okay. Okay, let's open it up to questions. John?
No questions.
David?
No questions.
Don, you read it. Any questions?
No, I worked on them.
Phil?
I guess I'm trying to understand what we're trying to do, which, and I'm not sure, I guess I'm not confident that this addresses what the concern is of ratifying people that are already hired. I guess part of my confusion was I was reading the administrative reg and assuming that was the policy. I made that error also. But do I understand that none of this, that nobody's time here will be commenced on a retroactive basis? If somebody starts as a six-month, 8-month employee, that if they work for, theoretically, they could work 30 days here before we get to a meeting, that their time is not retroactive? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, Mr. Allen, those individuals upon selection and before appointment would be apprised that their final employment is made by an appointment of the Board of Education in one of its public meetings, and that they will be informed of that even before they begin work awaiting appointment. And in many cases, they will be treated and compensated as substitutes would be, and you will see that in the administrative regs implementing the policy, we identify 3 levels or classes of substitute. The important thing here is to remember that only a Board of Education can employ a person through the appointment process, and this policy would provide for that to become our common practice, and you would therefore, at some future time, unless an extraordinary circumstance happened, would not have any more appointments made retroactive.
Is there any reason that if we do hire someone, that their status should not be retroactive to the day they actually started?
Is there any reason why it shouldn't be?
Why it should not be retroactive to the day they started?
It may be one of those cases where I said there would be rare exceptions where I or the Director of Personnel would contact the board and say, we have an unusual vacancy. Maybe it's something like a physics teacher. There's a shortage in the supply of physics teachers. We don't want this person to accept another contract offered someplace else. So we would want you to make that a retroactive appointment. And we would tell you that by personal contact, by pulling the board, or whatever it takes. And that would be an exception to your policy, but only you would permit the exception.
Can I follow on with what you're getting to, Bill?
Yeah.
If you don't mind? Does that mean that somebody who is put into that position, let me rephrase that. How does the Department of Education look at that particular employee as to their status for future accrual of time towards their eventual pension and things like that? What do they view? Essentially, we're saying they could work here for 30 days, but they've worked here for 30 days, and that may not count towards any future time for their benefits. Is that correct?
Well, I think probably the benefit you're talking about is a retirement system. And whatever rules it has would not be affected by this policy. If those rules provide that that person's time in the district, even before an official appointment, is counted toward retirement, that's the way it would be.
Mr. White, as soon as they start to be, as soon as they're paid, no matter what status they are, they're having retirement deducted, so retirement considers that their beginning time. It's really based on their salary rather than their status.
Okay.
At one time, that was not true, but it is true. They changed the rules, and retirement started as soon as an employee is put on the payroll.
Then this is just a matter of semantics?
Correct.
Is it a matter of money also? Are these people?
Well, it could be, because the board will establish annually what the rate of sub-pay might be. And if they begin under sub-pay, and it could be one of 3 levels of sub-pay, including the rate that a first-year teacher would receive, but the board will determine that as it annually adjusts any other salaries of employees.
The administrative regulation in number 4 requires that rates are yet to be established. Rates will be established. And those rates will be established, I assume, in view of current rates for substitutes and other current rates. But that's all ahead of us. That hasn't been accomplished yet. Or at least we're not bringing it forward yet.
It just seems to me that if we're hiring someone, and I agree with the principle that they're not an official employee until we pass, or we vote on them at an action meeting, but that it should be a retroactive thing. If they're hired, it should be retroactive. From the day they started, it's not as though they had to earn something or get more qualified for us to vote on them. They had everything that was required when we hired them.
I think, Mr.
And this is
Allen,
just a policy or an official acceptance of this person, and I think it should be retroactive.
Well, I think you have a good point, and I suspect that the decision that will be made after the board debates that very issue. And it is the board's decision to make.
Well, I don't think we should have to do it for every individual.
Well,
I don't know what makes a physics teacher
that's-
more important than a math teacher or an English teacher or a reading teacher.
That was my example of how there might be an exception to this policy. Now, you don't have to make this language the policy. The language that the board chooses, whatever it may be, which makes a retroactive appointment or which prohibits a retroactive appointment, is policy language. That's for the Board of Education to determine. And then it's for the staff to administer it. I'm not arguing with your point of view. You make a very good point of view. Now it's a matter for the board to determine if it wants, in fact, to permit retroactive appointments, or if it wants to, in fact, prohibit retroactive appointments. It's a matter of which language, which verbs you choose to put in this statement of board policy.
Well, I think it should be in the policy that says it's retroactive to the day of hire.
It could be.
I don't think that exposes the board to any obligation. We can still act on every individual as the rest of the policy suggests. But we're saying to the people, you are what you are from the day you started, not just because we voted some night.
Okay, let's have
That's
some
all.
more, that's fine, let's have some more discussion. Pat?
I'm satisfied with it the way it is. The only question I have is, Don, you said that you worked with Mr. Sweet on this?
No, through.
Through Mr. Sweet.
through
I know when we started discussing the different types of levels of teaching the professional teachers, have we covered all the bases here with just per diem, long-term, and temporary? Have we? Okay.
We're very careful about that.
I just want to make sure we spell it all out, because it seemed like there was 4 or 5 categories that night when we had the executive session about the different levels. I just want to make sure that we have it all spelled out, but I'm satisfied with it the way it is, Mr. Clemens.
Okay. Oh, you want to come back to
If
David?
you don't mind, for a person that didn't have any questions,
That's okay.
I'll
We're here
run through
for
this
it.
again, but I guess Bill's comments lead me to wonder. I mean, I think I may be guessing as to what some of the intent of doing this is essentially I guess the board felt that people were being hired and then the ratification came afterwards. I guess thinking about retroactivity and what we're doing in these particular classifications and how many times we might have to go back individually to try to make decisions isn't really the intent of what we want to do in the very first paragraph of this entire policy, which is to let people know you're hired, but until the board actually ratifies this employment, you can't be guaranteed of a job, rather than go through all of the other language to assign people into part-time positions, temporary, long-term, per diem. I mean, we do that anyway as we hire them for the positions. Why are we going through all of this when all we need to do is take care of our responsibility to just let people know? Yes, we want you to work here. This is the position we're hiring you for. But until it's ratified, understood that you may be here 30 days and not have a position. I mean, isn't that all that we really need to do without creating more work for ourselves to understand where somebody might be, whether we have to provide them with retroactivity or if we have to pay them on a different pay scale? I guess thinking about it a little more, I don't see the need for the entire thing as long as we fulfill our responsibility and let people know that until they're ratified, they're not guaranteed a long-term position here.
Well, as I didn't
I'll speak
comment.
to that.
Go ahead.
Speak
Yeah,
to
go
it,
ahead.
to the thing. This policy was reworked a number of times, obviously, to come where we were, and I think we need the words that are in here because we want to touch all the bases. And one of the points is that you're talking about retroactive, and you're concerned that the candidate that's hired is going to be paid for 30 days less money than he's going to be paid after 30 days. And I think that would be the exception rather than the rule, is because you understand when he's hired he's being hired on a substitute basis. The substitute basis, if we know we're going to hire a employee who's going to be per diem, he's going to be paid on a substitute per diem basis anyway, or a long-term or temporary, the three different classifications. So when he's hired or she's hired, until it's ratified, and 30 days being the worst case, is that they're going to be it's going to be rare that somebody that was hired as a long-term substitute is going to be then put into a different salary bracket or different location. So I think they're going to understand what their salary is going to be, and the changes would be minor, I think, in the long run. I think it's good to define within this policy we have the three different types of substitutes. We never were clear on those. We're going to define what those dollars are, whether it be per diem, long-term, or temporary. Right. And I think we're talking nickels and dimes here, not a lot of money difference, if there's any difference at all relative to hiring a new employee, making it retroactive or not making it retroactive. They're not going to be working for nothing for 30 days. And that's going to be a worst case.
Can we revisit the retroactivity piece again? I mean, what is it that we're talking about? We have three definitions for substitutes. We understand what they are. We understand what the rates are. They are different rates.
There will be different rates.
They are different rates. They are different rates than what they would be.
They're different.
We haven't established.
We have not to date established those rates.
So we're talking about that they could be less, or they could be equal to what we're currently paying the per diem, the long-term, and a temporary employee. So they could be less. What kind of position are we putting ourselves in terms of hiring people if we tell them that, gee, if you want to work here, you have to work for less, if that's the case, and if you're ratified, then we'll increase the salary to what the standard rate is. I don't really understand the purpose of doing that. I mean, it seems to me is that if we have a temporary person and we have a temporary need, and say it's some area of specialty that we absolutely have to have, and we decide that that rate is less, that person has an opportunity to go somewhere else and make a salary, as anybody does about going somewhere else. But why put ourselves in the position that we just might be losing good candidates for jobs because of this interim process?
I hear what you're saying. I really don't think that's I think that's not a real concern. I think the salaries that we're going to establish for per diem, long-term, and temporary are going to be salaries that are necessary to match with other school districts and what it's required to hire these teachers. And I don't think you're talking about like we're going to make these numbers real low and change them. I think these are going to be added, these numbers are going to be what is needed to hire competent employees.
Why would we make it any less?
Who said we were going to make it less?
Well, I mean, it's a discussion. I guess we're talking about the issues of retroactivity. In other words, if they're equal, if they are equal, and we give fair warning, I get back to the entire purpose of the policy at this point.
I think for clarification, we should add that we're talking about all categories of employees.
Right.
We're talking about bus drivers and secretaries and custodial folks and maintenance people,
Okay.
as well as teachers. This policy and this reg read for professional and all service staff. So we would need to establish, or the board would need to have established rates for every category of employee that would be higher rates, startup rates,
Well,
for
again,
all the many kinds of employees we hire.
Well, again, I get back to the point is that it seems like more work for us to do, and I think what we're all trying to accomplish is to make sure that no one is ever hired and guaranteed long-term employment here without board ratification. I think that was the intent. If that is the intent, why go to all this extra effort to create dual pay scales if that is what we intend to do? And if we don't, and they're equal, why go through all that? Just give fair warning that until ratification is there, you are not guaranteed long-term employment.
Basically,
That-
you're saying is that this page right here is enough.
Basically, that's, well, again, I'll read it just to make sure, but again, what I just said is that if we're telling people they're not guaranteed long-term employment without board ratification, I believe that satisfies the intent of what we were trying to get to.
Mr. Clark.
Go ahead, Pat, we'll keep discussing.
The only thing I want to say is that I like the policy, and I'll tell you why. Because when I came on board, until we had an executive session with Mr. Schmidt, I myself did not know what some of our hiring ratification practices were and so forth. And he was kind enough to come into a meeting and explain all that to us. And I think if not just for our benefit, that we can go to a regulation, I think for future boards, I think it's necessary at this point in time that we spell this out. And if it comes down to the point, you know, we don't have to make the starting salaries or whatever, the rates part of the reg, because, of course, they will change with times. But I personally think it's a good regulation, and I think it ought to stay in place just the way it is, because I think it fulfills your need, David, as far as saying that we're telling people that, you know, they're going to be hired on a particular basis and need board ratification. That's fine. I also like the other language where it spells out exactly what a per diem sub is and what a long-term sub is, and what a temporary sub is. Perhaps it does go to extreme, but I just think it's nice to have it, because I know myself, as I said, when I came on board, I had a lot of questions, and if I had something like this in place, it would have answered a lot of my questions for me.
Well, yeah, I'm just concerned that, you know, if our intent is to create dual pay scales, that's more work. If we do that and the scales happen to be lower, I'm sure they would never be higher. If they were lower, that we'd run the risk of losing candidates, and again, you could say that there's a lot out there, but if we needed a physics teacher, you know, at the middle school level for whatever case, and there's one person that comes to us and they have two offers, and one says, you can start at this rate, and my rate may be the same thing in 30 days. I mean, everybody knows they have to go through a ratification process. Where would they choose? It's a risk. I understand. It's minimal, but it's a risk. It seems to me that a dual scale, if that's what this policy would advocate creating, that I believe is not something we should be doing.
Well, let me reemphasize why this policy was written. One reason was because ratifications to come to the board, people to be on the board, was more than 30 days, some were 60 and so days. We wanted to reemphasize the fact that the board had to ratify long-time employees. That was understood but never spoken in policy. Number two is that when we saw a new candidate put on the board, the salary sometimes were different numbers, and there was always a question, why is this person getting more money than that person, and they're on a temporary basis, and so forth and so on. I think we needed to define what per diem, long-term, and temporary were. We always talked about those, but we never defined those terms. We needed to define those terms and put a dollar figure with those terms as related to the different classifications of jobs we have in there. I think the board, once it established these numbers across the board, I think it's going to be a lot of extra work. They have to be looked at every year as related to what the needs are to adjust those numbers. But I think we needed to have clearly stated in policy and in administrative regulations as to what the different types of substitutes there are and basically what we're paying for those substitutes. That was the reason. The two concerns was, do we know what we mean by substitutes? And two was, the board had to do the ratification. And that's the main purpose of this policy.
Just one last question.
Go ahead.
Do the three categories, per diem, long-term, and temporary, apply to all staff, professional, support, and otherwise? There's only three categories mentioned, and they're mentioned for substitute employment, and the policy is for professional and service staff. Do those three categories apply to all groups of employees? Mr. Schmidt?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So we're only dealing with professional staff in this case?
Primarily.
I think we should inject in the conversation at this point that we have language and terms that we're accustomed to because of Pennsylvania and because of the state. And a temporary professional employee with the state of Pennsylvania has certain meaning. And it's part of our language to talk about a TPE employee, a temporary professional employee. That has certain status. And that jargon, if you will, or that term, if you will, is apart from these three definitions. And I think that as we move forward with definitions and with salary levels, if in fact that happens, and this moves forward, that's why, that will all enter in to perhaps some modification of the regulation. And that's why this is part of the regulation and not part of the policy. The policy can stand and the regulation can be adjusted as it moves toward implementation. I think that there's every possibility that these terms might have different definitions by the time we work through all this. This is a first public look at this.
Dr. Bozen, I didn't line to ask a question.
Of whom?
Yeah?
Of whom?
Oh, I'm not sure whom I want to ask this question. But I need a point of clarification.
Sure.
Where are we relative to now? See, I'm dealing with this situation now. When I hear some conversation about there may be different scales, I'm curious as to what the board is asking us to do now.
Nothing right now.
Huh?
Nothing has
Nothing
changed
changes.
until this is implemented. Isn't that right?
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
And nothing will be changed relative, if you're concerned about salaries, what we're paying, nothing will be changed there until we determine what those salaries are. And if that probably is not going to happen this calendar year. It may happen during budget time or something for the next calendar year, school year. Maybe determine what a per diem is and long-term and temporary, and what those numbers are, but that's not going to change in the short term.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, Bill.
I'd like to ask of Fred if he thinks this is a workable policy on a day-to-day basis.
I think that the kinds of examples that have been cited certainly will cause some problems, and we're dealing with one now as an example that is a problem. I think it also, if you're talking about ratifications, you're not just talking about subs. And we have many professional employees that we hire, as well as other employees that we hire who are not subs. It's not unusual, and if you go back and look at your August minutes, you look at the people we hire in August, you look at September, and the number of people that are on the agenda in September for ratification, because we have to hire a lot of people at the end of the summer. And what do you do with those people? Do you give them temporary professional contracts and pay them $80 a day pending board approval at the latter part of September? It's fraught with some problems, but I mean, the board's made it pretty clear, and I think it was pretty clear that night we talked, that this was the direction that the board wanted to go in. And I think you have to work through some of those problems. The school district will lose some good people, because they won't want to wait or want to work for a month for $80 while somebody else who started the day before them is working for 2 times that much or more than 2 times that much. And if I guess, you know, I've worked with salary schedules and salaries and compensation plans for a long, long time, and I've investigated many of them. I've never come across one yet, though, that was designed to penalize people. They're all designed to treat people the same way, fair and equitably, and as similar as possible. And I think when you separate out the fact that you have some people that, based on when they get interviewed or based on when they can get put on the board agenda, and understand we're probably talking more than 30 days, although we're not talking that many work days. You know, we're talking a month time, but we're not talking 30 work days. But our lead time to get stuff on the agenda is a week or more than that before the board meeting. So that for us to get something on for this board meeting coming up, we've already had to put that stuff, we'll put that stuff in this week. So it could be longer than that. But I think if the intent is ratification, stick with the intent. Stick with the intent. If it broke so that everybody we hired in one particular month came in and we got them all hired at the same time, you'd pay them all the same thing, which would be the higher amount. If they all had only 1 or a couple days to wait, you'd pay them all the same amount. But if there's a couple days difference between, and then one maybe you're going to pay $176 a day, another one maybe you're going to pay $80 a day, and have that person doing the exact same thing, but they have to wait another month to get the same amount that the other person you just hired would be. So I think there are problems with it. I think you'll lose some people, but you know, if that's the direction the board wants to go in, and I think it'll be workable because whoever you put in this position will work at it.
Do you believe that, and I didn't set this up, but would retroactivity help solve that problem?
Well, I think it does for the people that really feel that that's an issue with them. And again, I think from my perspective, you deal with everybody the same way, in a fair way. I think that's fair. I don't think not making it retroactive is fair.
Thank you.
As simple as it may sound, I think fair is an important word, and that's something that I struggled with as I looked at this policy. I don't know that I'm ready to vote on this. I really wonder and like to ask some more questions about really what is fair, and really not only looking at just our teaching staff, but looking at the per diem, the per diem rates, whatever the case for, whether it be a bus driver, a teacher, an administrator. I need some more time. What I'd like to do is, poll the board, see if there's support to get it on for the, right now, I don't sense that there is support for action for first reading. I'm going to poll.
I agree with you, Tom. I think it needs
David?
more.
I obviously think that it needs some work.
Don, obviously.
Obviously, I don't.
You don't. Bill?
I don't want it on the agenda.
Pat?
I think it's fine the way it is.
Okay, I'd like to bring this to close. We're gonna, there's not support for it to be for the reading of the action meeting, and we'll send it back for some more work. I think we're on the right track. I think the intent is good. I don't know that I fully agree with it.
Well, let me say this, speaking for the policy committee, and that's fine. You have no problem with bringing me work, but I am very confused about this dialogue. I think we did what I thought the direction was. If that's not the direction you want, then I need something written by who wants it different and how they want it, and not just verbiage. I need something on a piece of paper that I can look at and give the policy to take a look at, and so I know, so I can consider how to rewrite it. But I just don't, I can't listen to the words tonight, I wouldn't know where to go.
That's a fair request. I think that
So people have concern. I have no problem about redoing it and relooking at it, but I want something in writing back to me that explains what you want.
I'll get something back in writing to you, and I would ask that other board members would do that. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move on. I got to get to the right page. Okay, under curriculum and instruction, item 1, the 1996-97 school calendar. Turn that over to Dr. Bose?
Well, this is something that I think we all understand that we might disagree on its content. This is the school calendar for next year. It's very much like the school calendar for this year. The only difference is there is one less student day and one more staff development day. And that's in recognition that we gave up a number of staff development days this school year because of the bad winter, when we made up some of the days we lost by altering the school calendar. So I think not only does the board want to discuss this calendar and whether it's prepared to accept it on the next agenda, but also it may want to discuss, and today's a good reminder, what we do when we have the kind of weather that might cause us to do the same adjustments to this year's calendar if that were to reoccur in the winter of '97. So while that's not necessarily critical to adopting the calendar, certainly is always in the back of the minds of those who think about school calendars and remember what we've just endured in the winter of '96. But is the school calendar with 187 teacher work days the same? 180 student days, one less, in deference to trying to make up the lost staff development days. The holiday periods are traditional holiday periods with the same configurations of days in school and days out of school. We begin school after Labor Day, and we hopefully will end school that second week in June. And that's all I would give by way of introduction, Mr. Clemens. Of course, there might be questions. Sure. Or suggestions.
Questions or suggestions? Let's start over here with Pat.
We went through this too.
Right. See, it's fine the way it is.
Yeah, you know, how can you project what next winter's gonna be like? I mean, I can't sit here and say, you know, today, April the 9th, 1996, is gonna be a problem next year. You know, we're just gonna have to probably be as flexible as we were this year and make adjustments if we have another winter like we had this year. And it still hasn't ended according to today's winter. I don't have any questions.
You okay with the way it is?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, Bill?
I'm like Pat, I'm going, but it did. I guess I've sat out there and been up here for 5 of these things, and I don't know that there's any right answer. But I just wonder if there's any value in taking snow makeup days as the snow happens. Meaning, if we lose a day in December, we instead of waiting to the end of the year for everything. Yeah, it's a mess. I don't know, Tom.
He makes a good point, though, Tommy. You know, and I probably should have said this, and I apologize.
Yeah, but why can't we handle that then on an as needed? So leave it the way it is.
Because the problem with that is people plan around the holidays.
Right.
That's the downside of it. And because I never have a life, it doesn't matter to me. But a lot of people, it's important, and I respect that.
I think Dr. Bose would agree that this calendar, which we have in front of us, is the result of considerable discussion at the cabinet level over any number of meetings. And certainly, you bring any group of people together, and they're not of one mind regarding this kind of a calendar. We have had these same discussions and debates this year as we've had every year.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we all bring an agenda that varies a little bit regarding, you know, what we would like. There was a time when we liked having the week off between Palm Sunday and Easter. We very much liked scheduling that week and keeping to it. But we've abandoned that for a couple of years. So I think that administrators at the table share the same kinds of concerns and frustrations that individual board members share. The problem is that we need to try our best to live by what we adopt. That's the thing.
Ken, I think that The problem with, once you set the calendar and then change it, is that we do affect an awful lot of people who, by virtue of looking at the calendar, have assumed that there are some liberties that they can take with vacation time. The 2 years we've had the heavy snows, 2 years ago and this year, we accommodated a lot of people, bus drivers, teachers, and other people for the time that we were making up, but they had already made plans to do something else. It's time out of the classroom. We end up, well, 2 years ago, we had all those people. We had 130 teachers out. We had 16 or 18 bus drivers out. The instruction doesn't go on in an effective way when you are staffing that many subs, if in fact you can do that. And I think you're a lot better off, whatever you adopt, then stick with it. Stay with that, because otherwise you're going to pay for it by changing it.
The only problem I think with that though, Fred, is, if I remember the discussions in the past, is that you put the makeup days at the end of the year, and you and I both know what happens at the end of the year. As soon as the grass turns green and the weather gets warm, you have an additional problem.
But
I agree with what you're saying, you should stick with it. I think that, and I don't know if it's workable, and maybe this is what Bill was alluding to, and not to read your mind, but maybe you're alluding to the same thing. Somehow we could work it where we could maybe make contingency plans during the winter months for the snow days, and then if it doesn't snow, we just, a week or two ahead of there, a week ahead of time, give them the extra day off as a normal week off for Easter or whatever. I don't know.
Pat, you do that by
I don't
adding
know.
days at the end.
Well, I know that.
That's the catch-22.
I know that, but that's where the catch-22 comes in with this thing, and I've seen this, for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's sitting out there and watching it and everything else. It's, you make up the makeup days at the end of the year, and like I said, the kids have been going all year, they're going through a hard winter, and you're gonna lose them that way too.
Let me put it this way, for discussion purposes. I have nothing better to offer.
I don't.
I thank you all for putting this together. This is great.
It is
All I'll
great.
do is vote, whatever everybody wants. Unless we have a good idea that makes sense.
We have to vote on
We can
something.
discuss this till midnight.
I would
They've been doing
agree
it.
with
I got
that.
nothing.
However, I need to say that just because that I vote for this next month, and we get 2 weeks of straight snow next year, doesn't mean I won't change my mind next year to
I
say,
understand.
let's try to readjust this
Yeah,
thing.
right.
And I
Well,
think that's
it's-
just being upfront.
It's not made for 2 weeks off of snow days. Let's be
I
honest.
think you're right though, Tom. Someone went through an awful lot of effort to set this, and their crystal ball probably isn't any more cloudy than ours.
Let's go over to this side for some questions for discussion.
We get answers on that side, Tom. We get
David has
answers.
answers.
We ask questions.
I'll jump in here. First of all, I like the calendar for a couple of different reasons, and I like where the in-services are, although I have a question about the in-service days. Typically, the days before the first day of school, I know many staff members are in their classrooms trying to get their classrooms together, and is that a major inconvenience? Although, again, I like the in-service days early before the snow hits. Hopefully, we won't have to cancel in-service days. So that was one concern. One, about getting classrooms together in September, and two, getting some of these in-service days accomplished before the bad weather hits. Secondly, about the winter holiday. Is there some way that we might want to look at a Monday and Tuesday, whatever dates those are, is the 23rd, the 24th, something like that? We don't know, that won't work. I was just thinking that if there was a snow day in November, a nice blizzard in November, we might want to
Thanks.
shorten that holiday
David.
before the year.
If we have that
Haven't had
blizzard in
enough snow,
November,
right?
I would think that the board might be open to
Well,
discuss that.
it's just a consideration, because after that, there aren't too many breaks, and then the in-service days at the end. So really, for as far as trying to get any advanced planning in there, this is about the best we're gonna do.
John?
Well, like I was telling these folks, I'll probably buy a snow blower this year, so it won't snow next year, so,
That'll go fine. Don?
it won't snow.
Question, if in fact we use these makeup days in June, what does that do to the seniors? They have to abide by the same rules?
Well, we don't, you might remember seeing Dr. Barnes' memorandum distributed, I think it's in the materials tonight, that schedules the seniors' year when we feel we're out of the snow season. So that announcement about how the seniors will end their school year has been made just recently, assuming it won't be affected by weather. We think April should be safe.
Should be safe. Should be safe.
Should be.
Mother Nature has not been cooperative this year.
We have said for planning purposes that April 1st is the day that we will tell the community when the information will be held.
We always publish that, approximately April 1st.
So, but Don, the answer to your question is that if in fact we have 2 weeks of snow and it's all made up at the end of the year, someone would probably be asking for an extension for seniors.
And that has been done in the past.
I think, Esther, that was your question.
That was my question, and I guess the corollary of that question is that good or bad, or does it make any difference?
It makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah, we lose subsidy, Mr. Hill. We lose subsidy if whatever group of students doesn't make 180 days, we lose subsidy for that.
He and I are talking about two differences. I said it makes a significant difference, and he said it makes a difference. His significant difference about subsidies, mine is about the seniors. Because we lose some of those youngsters to summer schools and some other activities that following week.
All right.
I'm trying to find my green sheet that we did get from Lon. What is our last day? There it is.
Thursday the 12th?
Thursday the 12th.
For this year. The last day for all students is Thursday, Friday the 13th.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the calendar?
There's no perfect school.
Nope.
Except that everyone makes his own.
That's what families do.
Then we will go ahead and place this proposed calendar on the action agenda for next Thursday.
Yes, please.
Okay. We'll move on to item 2, which is the vision and mission statements revised. I'll turn that over to Sandy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clemens. As you recall, at the last board meeting, Mrs. Shearer had requested that the vision and the mission statement that had been developed by the planning committee of the long-range plan be brought before this board in hopes that there would be approval of it so that we could move forward and give the support to the action teams who are working very diligently to prepare the action plans to set in place the activities that we will be looking at for the next 6 years. The guidelines that we looked at in terms of developing this vision and mission statement came out of a format that was before you on the onset of this process, which was a combination of Cambridge, Kaufman, and the DuPont models. We used a very specific format to, over 3 days, define what the vision and mission statements would be. There were 54 representatives from the community, area businesses, colleges, universities, North Penn staff, and board members who met and very diligently looked at a lot of things to try to come up with a new vision and mission statement. The previous one had been developed in 1991. We were looking for something that would take us into the future of where we were going to be for this district. We spent considerable length of time looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats to us as a district, and came up with what we felt was good statements that set a course for where we felt we would want to go, set the tone for where the district was headed, provided some basic elements to bring some consistency to the district with all future activities, those being presented in the future by the action plans and the action teams, which will be coming up at the end of May, would then provide alignment to these basic belief statements. The vision statement has been collapsed into a single statement, and when we look at the current vision statement and look at this vision statement, the things that are different would be the inspiration to each student, to become a responsible citizen in a changing society. We have reaffirmed the belief that we would like each student to work toward reaching their highest potential. In a mission statement, we have added some opportunities for students to work within a wide range of educational programs and opportunities in a safe learning environment. That was discussed at length, that we wanted to make sure that our schools were safe for learning to take place. We added motivation in terms of independence, cooperative, lifelong learning, and adaptation to change. We wanted to make sure that we would be able to provide comprehensive, future-oriented experiences with effective teaching strategies and up-to-date technology. We wanted to promote academic excellence. In our previous statement, it had high standards. We wanted to make sure that we went further. We looked at the term diversity and the dignity worth of each individual, and we went further with beyond just an appreciation for the value of diversity, and we encouraged the respect for and the dignity of each person. In the statement that reflects the encouragement of the development of personal integrity and civic responsibility, those are new statements. Through the application of the universal values, we found that the universal values that had been accepted by the board through the Guidance Review Committee were such that they should be available throughout all of the curricular areas and really a foundation from which we could go forth. Those universal values that had been accepted by the board for the Guidance Review Committee included civic responsibility, consideration, cooperation, dependability, fairness, goodwill, honesty, kindness, orderliness, patience, perseverance, politeness, respect, responsibility, and sportsmanship. We also went further in terms of promoting educational partnerships as opposed to the term linkages. We felt strongly that there needed to be a real partnering between the school, the home, and the community. So this is the vision and the mission that these action teams of 261 people now have been working on developing the action plans that will be coming forth. And there will be a process by which we will begin to prioritize and look at them financially. And all of that will take place within the next months that are coming ahead. But for now, we were looking for the board to accept this vision and mission statement as the foundation of the core beliefs, trying to set the course where we're going for the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think the board would remember that the suggestion that the board adopt it now before it gets the entire package in August or September came from the board itself. And my expectation is that was a desire to see the document developed. You said 91, Dr. May, again. In 91 replaced by the one developed in 96.
And I think that the intent was also that any documents that would be going out, any publications that would be developed, would have this foundation in it.
That's right. That's great. Okay, let's open it up for questions. Start with John.
I think it's wonderful. You're doing a great job, Mrs. McGann.
Thank you.
It's just it's a great statement. Really, I support it.
David.
I was part of the group that was there to draft it, so I get one of the letters in here somewhere, credit. maybe a D, maybe. No, I think it's fine. I think it's a very positive statement of what the school district's about to help us move forward, and hopefully the planning of all the other individual action teams will help this come about.
Thanks. Pat. I'm sorry, Don.
No comment.
Bill.
Yes, I think it's a good statement, and I thank you all for doing this. But I think it's real important that we do accept this so that this is the foundation of everything else that your committee does in the future. Without that foundation, you have nothing to build on. So I do suggest that we do get it on the agenda for next week. Thank you.
Pat.
The only question I had, Dr. Mangano, is why have we shortened the vision statement as opposed to what we currently have on the walls of this building right now?
It's not necessarily a matter of shortening it, but it was reframing it. When we looked at what was done in 1991 and the format that was used by Dr. Bannock when that was designed, and we looked at the different way that vision statements are currently used, there are new design forms that people look at in terms of constructing things, tightening it up, keeping it into a very simple core belief systems, and really looking at something not more than 100 words and 6 bullets. And so we were very specific in terms of trying to get everything in to tighten the language up. And there are very few things missing from it. I think the key thing that we wanted to impart in this was that we were really looking for all children to be affected in a way that would allow them to reach their full potential. That was the key thing in the vision. Everything else underneath that would be the way in which you would make that happen. So that was the intent of the committee, was to really shorten the vision statement and make it very concise.
Because I personally found nothing wrong with our vision statement the way it is, but if that's what the committee decided, then it makes sense. I don't have a problem.
I did attend the first steering committee meeting. I didn't attend any of the meetings as part of framing this. I just want to ask again, the list that you gave me, Dr. Mangano, the list of community representatives and also school district representatives.
Yes.
Was there a vote taken for this, or how did you come about it?
Yes. One of the strong recommendations, and again, it is a new way of looking at vision and mission development, strategic planning, that is recommended, is not to take a vote, but to arrive at consensus.
Okay.
And we did.
Okay.
And it was it was a wonderful task. It took a good 2.5 days to really work at trying to develop this, but in the end, it was truly the group that came to consensus and applauded themselves without having to take a vote, and they were in total agreement.
Okay.
And that, you have the list of all people that was there.
It does say unanimous here in your preface. Unanimously accepted.
Good consensus, yes.
One thing I wanted to clarify though, that was also school, not just community members though, that was school district representatives.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And Bill Roman is here. I talked to Bill earlier. Bill has been a very good support for me in much of this process, and he has offered to answer any questions too as a member of the committee that you might have directed to any of this process.
Anybody have any questions? I don't hear any. I think that we'll go ahead and move forward to go ahead and put this on the agenda. I didn't hear any negative comments.
Put it on.
We'll go ahead and put it on the agenda.
We are voting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item number 3, 1996 summer school program. Let me get back to that page.
Thanks, Pat.
This is a proposal for summer school, not unlike our summer schools of the past. And the specifics can be addressed by Dr. Bond, who produced this green sheet for your discussion and your information.
The one thing that I didn't include on here that I should have included is that Mrs. Dickerson will be the principal for summer school. She did it last year as well. Now, the other thing that you should know is that this summer school was purely remedial, and it is our hope that this will be the last summer that will be purely remedial, that there is a process in place to take a look at summer school in this district and hopefully adding some enrichment courses as well as remedial courses, and that will be coming forth during the next school year. So you probably will be getting some questions about that. You should know that is a work in progress. When we thought about summer school for this year and all of the things that we had to do, this was one of the things that we just felt we couldn't do it justice and come forward this year with the program. We just couldn't do it.
Thank you, Dr. Monk. Okay, questions or comments about the summer school program? Pat?
Something you said, hopefully the last year for remedial?
No, for just remedial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Thank you.
No, gosh, no, you don't want, no.
And the other plan you're talking about, obviously, is the Allen Gold plan that you and I
Well,
did a little conversation.
that's one of several things we're looking at.
Right.
We're looking at, it's much broader than Allen
I
Gold's
understand.
plan, but that is one of the things that is being considered, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bill?
No questions.
Don?
No, I guess this is basically the same plan as
It
last
is.
year, just
It is.
upgraded.
Yes.
David?
I should know the answer to this, but it escapes me. What about resident students that may not be able to pay?
We put them on a payment plan. Put them on a payment plan.
Okay, but consideration is made.
Consideration
To
is
make
that
sure-
they have to pay prior to graduation.
Okay.
Yes. But we work out a payment plan. Some pay $10 a month, some pay $15 a month, some wait until payday to pay.
Okay.
But there's no youngster who needs to go to summer school that doesn't go to summer school because they can't pay at the moment. But we feel very strongly that prior to their getting a diploma, that is their responsibility.
Thank you.
John? Any other questions or comments before we open this portion up to the community?
We are done.
Okay, before we open the questions and comments from the community, one thing I would ask of the community is that we didn't get into any discussion about revenues tonight, and I'd ask that you would limit your questions to only things that we did talk about tonight, which did appear on the agenda. And again, I'd ask that we really don't get into any heavy-duty discussion on revenues. We will discuss that, as I mentioned earlier, at our first budget work session. So I'll open it up. Mr. Anderson?
So you have something from
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Greg Anderson, Montgomery Township. I have just three brief questions about three different issues. On the school calendar, is there any legal reason why in-service days could not begin before the Labor Day holiday, if it's mostly classroom preparation, and make a little more room in the calendar for the children themselves that way? Or is that just traditionally how we...
There's no limitation on that.
It's not part of the teacher's contract that they can't begin before Labor Day or something like that?
There's no law that would prohibit that.
Okay, I mean, for future years, has anybody computed, like, for the last 5 years, what our average snow days have been? Is 5 generally sufficient, and the last 2 years were just extreme, or has anybody sat down and looked at what our...
Weatherman can't predict snow days.
Last year. Okay. With regard to the bond funding, I wondered, since it was a matter of great concern prior to this board taking office and even some legal action against the school district, whether an attempt would be made to adopt and formulate a policy governing how that process will occur as a board policy prior to actually undertaking any kind of bonding efforts. I mean, I've had some discussion with Dr.
on that, and I believe that as we work in developing the RFP, sending out the RFP, and entertain discussions about that, I would think that we will discuss that.
I would like to see that, and of course, I've been in
exactly
communication
right.
with Mr. Hill about that, so.
The different items, specific items were pointed out as far as what did and did not go on bond issues.
Okay. Finally, with regard to the employment procedures, I'd like to agree with Mr. Allen and Mr. White that this strikes me something which started out with good intentions and maybe moving in a direction of trying to nickel and dime employees in their initial period of employment. I can't imagine, I no longer for my own company get involved in every hiring procedure. I can't imagine a situation where the person who is allowed to make hiring decisions would have to tell a prospective employee, you know, Greg's in California for a week on business, so you're going to have to work at a different wage rate for a week till he can come back and formally ratify your employment. And it strikes me that would make our opportunity less desirable and gets the employment relationship off to a rather bad start and might leave a bad enough taste in their mouth that they'd choose simply to take a different opportunity. So I'd like you to consider something along the lines that Mr. White's and Mr. Allen suggested as far as retroactivity to the pay scale that's applied to them.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Sorry? Art.
Art Ramsey from North Wales. I have a question for Mr. Kelly. Are we able to get any grant money for these financial situation from the state? Do they ever grant us any money for anything like that?
What do you mean, Mr.
For the
Green?
building projects and what we're going to undertake?
Oh, sure. Once the Plan Con process is undertaken, the state develops a reimbursement. What percentage of the project will be reimbursed to the district? But that's based on what the Plan Con and what, after they review what the architect's drawings would be for it.
So we have to wait till the architect comes up with his findings, right?
And then when we file our Plan Con with the state, then they develop what our rental reimbursement will be on that project.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And Mrs. Mangano, Dr. Mangano, are you looking into the finances on your planning projects at all?
We sure are. Mr. Kelly is chairing the action team, the financial action team, that is one of the action teams. Dennis, maybe you'd like to abbreviate a little bit of the kinds of things we're looking for.
Sure. Our committee's developed a form that the other committees are going to fill out, and so we can get a good handle on the financial aspects of the plans that they want to implement, so that we can put them into a budget and see how they fit.
So you're going to get back to the taxpayers on all of this,
Yes,
right?
we will. Yes, we will.
Because the taxpayers are footing the bill for all this, and we want to know what's going down.
And that's why we're doing it.
Good, very good. And I have one more question for Mrs. Clark. If I may, Tom, it's not what you were discussing here,
It
but
needs to be part of the agenda under the work session, Art.
I'm allowed to do it?
No, only if it's what we discussed tonight in the work session. If you have a question that was not on the work session, you can bring it up at the action meeting. That's when we open up for comments on anything.
Okay, then I'll have to see you later.
Yes.
Watch out.
Okay.
Available for dinner?
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, if you're available for dinner and you're tired. And Mr. Hill, getting back to you, you have a very good idea, because it brings more power back to the local district and gives the board more power in what you're trying to do. So stick with your idea, because we're all in favor of that. Taxpayers, that is. Okay? We want to see that the board gets more power locally, because the state's been sending down a lot of mandates, but they're not sending the money down with it. And we want the board to have more say in what's going on in the district. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, before I move to adjourn, I would like to announce that there will be an executive session tomorrow evening to discuss personnel issues. Is there movement to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
Move second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.